Timothy.
Hello.
Today we are talking with one of my friends. I have people too, you know. You're so
Have
fancy with your
me.
contact list.
Have me. My goodness.
We're talking about a
What
sub.
is your shirt say?
It says, I myself am
Uh,
strange and unusual from Beetlejuice. I thought it was fitting because we're talking about
Fit.
learning, right? We're talking, well, I mean, generally it fits, but we're talking about learning and how people learn differently. This is something near and dear to my heart. Um, we have Heather on today as a friend of mine, and I just went through a whole program with them to see about my daughter. And so she's got some learning difficulties as well. I'm sure we're going to get into it, but definitely near and dear to my heart because I myself am strange and unusual. And I also, that was totally a good plug, wasn't it? I also have undiagnosed dyslexia myself. And so there's like a whole spin-off of stuff here. And I'm
I like that you're theme dressing now, but I mean, I'm in a car in a Walmart parking lot because I had to get a signal and left the beautiful place that I was. And as you know, with this van life lifestyle, I don't have enough clothing to be theme dressed, so I can't handle the expectation that I might have to wear a different t-shirt on any given day.
this just was happenstance, and I was like, I
All
feel
right.
like it fits. We're gonna do it.
All right.
Um, okay, so
Gonna
let's
do it.
let's let Heather in, and we're gonna get down to it. Does that sound good?
100%.
All right. Mhm.
Well, now we know what our company is. Open door.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Welcome. Kim,
Thank
Timothy made
you.
me point out that I theme dressed today. I myself am
Yeah.
strange and unusual. Felt like it fit for many things.
Absolutely. That shirt was made for you.
So we're digging into the topic of learning. Um,
Yeah.
really talking about how there's different styles of learning, and if the child doesn't fit into whatever box society has put them into or wants to cram them into, it doesn't mean that they're lazy. They're not broken. We're really trying to figure out why they're struggling. That's kind of where we're going today.
Yep.
Heather, can you tell us a little bit more about the open door? Tell us a little bit about your background. I was talking with Timothy earlier, and although we're friends, I've also now delved into this with Eva, and that's kind of where we decided to start talking about this on the podcast as well. But let's start kind of, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So the quick version is because we could go back into quite some history, but essentially my background is special education, and working as a teacher, very focused in that area of the learning disabilities. And I just kept seeing over and over and over so many kids that were falling through the cracks, not getting identified. I mean, coming along to me in grade 8, and no one had any idea that there was something up, something different. And they thought it was because the kid was lazy. They just weren't trying hard enough. They weren't motivated. And I would be with them for such a short time. And it was such a textbook case of a learning disability that hadn't been caught. So you can imagine these kids and their mind space and their confidence levels for going that far along without anyone thinking that their struggles were not because they just didn't care. So, anyways, at one point, I just reached this decision. I had to do something more than I could working as a teacher in a small private school. I was head of special education, but there was still only a small amount of students that I could directly help in my role. So I quit my job and I started the open door so that we could reach and help more kids, more families, and more teachers just by providing more awareness and education. So the primary thing
So
we do is the tutoring, working with those kids specifically, but education and other supporting offerings are connected in with that too.
And Timothy, I'll
And
give you the foresight to be careful where you tread because she, like me, is very angry with our system. I'm angry with the senior care system. She's angry with the education system. And so if you poke us the right way, you never know what we're gonna say. But to that point, right, when we did the testing and stuff, just on as a side, because I talked about it at the top, and gave it to the teachers. They were like, Eva's in grade 1, and they were just shocked. They had no idea. They said like they couldn't see it, and like my business is all proactive, right? And it's like I just like Heather and I've talked about this, where it's just like so difficult. It's difficult for the students. It's difficult for the parents. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what to train people on and all that. Sorry, Timothy, go ahead.
no, you can just explain the whole thing for me because I was going to ask a naive question about uh this isn't just about the child, right? Like this must impact the parents, the entire family as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, that it impacts them in terms of the struggles that the family goes through when their child is suffering, because it is. I mean, mentally, educationally, on so many levels, socially, but then also when that time comes that the child is identified and they realize what's going on, there can be so much guilt or what could I've done differently, or the feeling from the parent like they had failed the child, even though the parent is, it's the same as not recognizing a medical issue from a symptom that a parent would have no idea. You're not a doctor, you're not trained in that area, and you're not taught what to look for as warning signs. So it's, mom guilt, very real, and rears its head so easily. But it is a struggle for the parents as well, even though there would be no way for them to know what those warning signs were to watch for unless they had all the special training associated with it.
Well, I would tell you as well.
Who was supposed to see this thing? Like Amy, like how are parents supposed to know even what to like who's the person that's supposed to pick this up?
Well, what I was going to say, we're always perfectly matched, aren't we, Kim?
I know. It's
What I
funny.
was going to say is that the only reason I picked it up is because of my own difficulties. That's the only reason, because when we talk to our teachers about it, and they're doing a phenomenal job, but to, Heather and I's private conversation, they just don't have all of the training that needs to be done here. And so even when we talked to them, they said, oh, for grade 1, this is like a reasonable. But I'm looking at it and I have a kid that's crying and upset that she's never going to read. And I'm getting flashbacks of flashcards from when I was a kid when they didn't really diagnose as much or didn't know as much about dyslexia specifically. And I like on my journey of stuff to like break away from, I was like, yeah, this is like, we're not going to wait to do that. And so the only reason I picked it up is because of me. Heather, how do other parents, like maybe that don't have this typical situation, how do they pick it up?
Yeah, I mean, and both of your questions obviously tying very closely. In a perfect world, the teachers would be seeing these red flags and warning signs and initiating the next steps, which would be assessing the situation, assessing the child. But having gone through the whole, teacher's education process, it's not it's not something that's taught, not nearly to the degree that it needs to be. And I can't even tell you how many times I've gone that I'm walking through a school, even my daughter's school as a parent, and I see the kids' art up on the walls with their writing, and I'm looking at these little writing samples, and I'm like, oh, that kid, I really hope someone has flagged that kid. And then a few down, I'm like, oh, that one too. And there's, once you've learned it, it stands out. It's like when you're shopping for a red car, you start seeing red cars everywhere. It's that idea. Once you know it, it jumps out, but it's not taught. And this is one of the things in the systems that needs to be changed, because that the teachers in the classrooms, that's the first line of defense. They're the ones who are with the kids for so many hours a day in the environment where the child is learning. And so a big focus on education for teachers, and not just at the younger grades, although that's very, very important to catch them young, but at all the different grade levels, because they do slip through and get passed along through the system and can reach high school before they're identified. And it would just take one teacher who has that knowledge to catch it.
I mean, I made it through college and university. So,
Yes.
I mean, like 4 to 6 years or 6 years of post high school before like I knew of, but didn't really hook it in, right? And it's like, I made it pretty far. Like, because, and I would love your opinion on it. I would say because kids that learn differently figure out life differently. And so for me, that's why I'm such a good problem solver. That's why I, there's a word that I want to use, and it's like, okay, I don't know how to spell that word. So what's the other word? Now, voice to text is amazing. It's my best friend because then, like, it's just so much easier, right? It's all the tools that we now have that we can use. Um, but like, yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and you have a lot of resilience, right? You ended up growing up as a result to be scrappy, right? Other people,
Oh, she's scrappy.
oh,
Trust
I
me,
know
she's
it.
scrappy.
She'll scrap anytime.
But
But
what did, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt because I think you're going in the same direction because
mm,
resiliency, obviously a positive, but how does this impact overall mental health and where are the two things connected? Because this is a show about mental health, which we've now learned is pretty much connected to everything on the face of the planet. But how does it all fit together? Because Amy had a positive outcome from being scrappy and learning resilience, but this has to be hard on the kids and the parents and the siblings.
absolutely. And I mean, of course, there's different outcomes depending as well on when it was identified, right? A child that they were identified as being explained, you learn differently. You are smart, but you need to be taught in a way that's different just because of the way that your brain processes information, and you're capable of learning, and you have all of these areas of amazing strength that can be a very different path than someone who either isn't, or they are identified much later on, because it's taken a much heavier toll on their confidence and their emotional well-being and their, I mean, I'm just thinking of a very random example. I was at a hotel, I was in the pool, there was another young couple there, the girl was maybe in her late 20s, we were chatting, and I was there at a conference about dyslexia. And so she was conversationally asking why I was there. So we were talking, she was asking me some questions. And as we were starting to talk about it, she started to cry. And she said, because she wasn't there for that conference, she was there for other reasons. And she said, in having this conversation with you, I realize for the first time ever, that might be me. And if it is, I've just found out that I'm not an absolute idiot. And maybe it's something else. And it was just, oh, this big moment. And, if that girl had been identified at a much younger age, there's still struggles and there's still tolls. There's still an otherness, a feeling of difference and needing different help than other kids. But you can imagine it's a pretty big difference than the ones who have just gone their whole lives with these really negative illusions about themselves.
I mean,
Is that your
one
experience, Amy?
That's definitely my experience. And one of the things is that, not only did I want to catch this early as soon as I saw it, poor Eva's got ADD from her dad and dyslexia for her mom. Like we're a great soup over here. But she's so smart. Like she's so smart and she's really good at math and different things like that. I just didn't want her to struggle in the way that I struggled. And I also could see it very quickly that she was getting so discouraged that like she was starting to not like learning, and like we've got to be in the spot where she likes learning to get what she needs to get done. So, to the confidence thing, I will tell you, which I don't know if I've told Heather, but Eva's had a couple of tutoring sessions, and the first session she bounded down our stairs, confident as all get out, super excited, loved her life. It was just like so heartwarming.
Mm.
Like you could immediately see it as soon as someone starts talking to them on their level or where they're at, the confidence starts to swell up, and it's like I'm grateful that we caught it so that we maybe didn't have to go down a whole other route of trying to get it back, because as you both know, trying to get something back later is just like a slippery slope, right? Anything like through, we've talked about trauma, we've talked about different stuff, and trying to like regain yourself or who you were supposed to be and didn't end up being, and trying to figure that out is just like a whole other problem at the end of the day.
Yeah. And for kids too, that it is later on, the parents obviously seeing that their child is struggling and wanting to help will often put them in, just tutoring with, the nice retired teacher lady, or the, teenager looking to make some extra money, or those, you know, centers where it's sort of one approach fits all for children and they just need more practice of the same thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these kids have been through so many different approaches and so many different programs and, different tutors and different after school education programs. They are so sick of it. They are so jaded. They're like, I don't want to try another thing that I'm just going to fail and feel stupid.
Yeah.
And so, again, when it's starting later, it does take longer because, it takes a little time for them to build up some of those skills that they start seeing a change. And they're like, oh, okay, this is actually making a difference because it's such a different approach, because it's based on how they learn instead of the one size fits all.
So funny, not funny. Why is
This is
dyslexia
probably a
so
stupid. Oh,
difficult? Why is it such a difficult word? Dyslexia. Why the F?
and where does it
Spelling it, saying
and
it.
where does it come from?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the
Like
word,
where
yeah,
does
it's,
it,
Oh, she froze. Like
oh,
I don't understand
the
why.
namers of words. I don't know if you've ever seen those little videos that come up, those comedic
right.
ones, but things like the word speech impediment is very, very hard to say if you have a speech impediment. There's so many of them.
Like why?
Um,
Why are they doing this to us? Who is making these phrases and sayings, and then expecting the people that have the difficulty with it to try to track that shit down?
they're all sitting in a boardroom cackling. I mean, it's linguistically based, right? Like from Latin derivatives and stuff, but that doesn't help make it any easier to spell.
No. I like literally couldn't say it the other day, and it's just because my mind wouldn't wrap around it for a minute. And I was like, it was fun. Oh my goodness. Kimothy, you froze for a minute. You have a question? Are you
But
back?
so it's in the brain. Like it's in the brain. It originates in the brain. It's not a learning. You don't learn to have a learning disability. It is something that you're born with, correct?
Yes. I mean, you can get from concussions and certain, you know,
Oh, good.
damaging
Oh, good.
events. Things can happen from that. But in terms of what we're talking about, yes, it's the like there's different regions of the brain that have developed differently, or information will take different pathways. And so as a result, they need to be taught differently. Certain parts of the brain haven't developed the same way. So you could identify, and there's actually all kinds of brain scans, fMRIs that you can look at online, which is really interesting, of a neurotypical brain while the person is reading, what's lighting up, what's activating, and someone with dyslexia
Ah,
while they're reading, and you can see the differences. The
cool.
Dyslexia Center for Yale Yale Dyslexia Center And there's someone called Sally Shayowitz who has done so much research, and you can see these side by side, and it's very interesting. So you could identify someone without needing to do any tests. You could just do a brain scan. Obviously, that'd be a very pricey approach, but yeah, it is very much a brain-based neurological
Huh.
thing.
I mean,
And so you can retrain the brain to do it differently.
Yes, yes, that's
Cool.
it's very much. There's a lot of repetitive parts to do exactly that. Train the brain to be able to, distinguish between certain sounds and learn how to run those sounds together. I mean, if for our students, when we're first working with them, we can teach them that's a letter C and it says k, and that's the letter A and it says ah, and that's the letter T and it says t. Now, if you put those three together, what does it say? What? That's a crazy question. They're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So you have to actually teach how to say the sound and run it into the next, and no pause between the sounds. It's getting into it at a level that is so much more fine detail than what your neurotypical kid would need. They would pick it up so much more naturally.
do kids often, I'm guessing a lot, as from what we're talking about, they fly under the radar. And one of Timothy's questions that as you know, we prepare, but we're not sticking by a script or anything. But one of them was interesting to me where the kids fly under the radar, and I because I'm living it with my daughter, and I think that she was deemed a bit of a troublemaker. And then I think that she got less attention on other things and just deemed like it was like a problem child scenario. Meanwhile, some of her friends, uh, but I feel like she was the one that was like that shit was her. And so I've been very like upfront with these teachers. They're doing their job. I get it. I understand what's happening. But at the same time, I'm like, my child's not the problem. And so like I gotta stick up for her, right? Because I understand the dynamics of what's happening. But to the point of earlier, I think that that didn't help. I think that her being this named problem child for being outgoing, independent, all the stuff, and having some scrappier friends as well that intertwine. They're like seven, right? So everybody scraps. I feel like that didn't help with the identification of anything because they just kind of labeled her. Is that something? Does that happen?
It's funny because one of two things happen. So first you have your children, and it is more common with the girls, that if they are really struggling, that some of them will shut down. They'll hide. They'll try to avoid notice at every possible way. They'll be super quiet, over the top obedient, because they're embarrassed at how much they're struggling. They don't want attention brought to them. Those ones don't get identified because they're not causing enough of an issue to get any attention, and because they are able to hide their struggles, especially if they're very smart, because then they can find workarounds that they can make it look like they aren't struggling as much as they are. Then you have your kids who are acting up because they're struggling, because let's face it, most kids are going to go one route or the other. If they're having trouble, they're not going to be that sort of middle, even-keeled child as a general rule. And so the ones that are acting up, they do get the attention from the teacher, right? Because the teacher has to pay attention to them because they're being disruptive or doing whatever it is. And those ones, as they get older, are more likely, especially if they're causing enough difficulty, to have assessments done and get identified as, ADHD or something like that.
Mm.
But again, because they're acting up, they will say, oh, well, this child is struggling and failing in the academic region because of how much they're acting up, or because they have ADHD, as opposed to this child is acting up because they're struggling. So they think if you fix the acting up problem, then suddenly they'll do well in school. So it's either way.
How common How
That's
common
such,
is this? Like if, I mean, I know there are all these children who have not been identified early and adults maybe just learning now, but like how common is this?
it's 20% of the population.
One in five.
Um, Pardon me?
One
20%.
one in
Oh,
five
yes.
people walking around. I went to summer school in grade 10 for math, but I'm pretty sure that's one in five. Um, and uh, it's amazing to me there isn't a more robust screening early on.
Yes. Well, and I mean, in the 20%, it is a spectrum of severity, right? So it can
Yeah.
be they do have a learning disability, which means they are not reaching their full potential without extra supports or different approaches to up the most extreme levels where those kids, yeah, they're getting identified because it's very, very evident to anyone. So
Right.
it's a whole spectrum, but it is that 20%. Um, and then for the screening process, there is some positive movement in that department. A few years ago, there was a whole class action lawsuit, right to read. That's in Ontario, Canada here that was, but there's been a lot of grassroots movements that are parent led to try to get the schools on board. And so there has been improvements. There's a lot more room, which Amy can attest to as someone who is currently right now going through that, despite how much it's improved from when it was even 5 years ago. But there needs to be a lot more. And there's things that can be done that are not that difficult or expensive, that could catch so many more students. And so it's just always trying to raise education, trying to get things out there to even directly to the teachers, making podcasts or doing talks or things like that, just to try to get as many people's eyes open of what to watch for and
Get
how
someone
to,
scrappy on it.
yeah.
Well, and our conversation about this started when he was in French immersion and they sent home an English assessment that I was like, Heather, I'm horrified because it was like all zeros. Like it was, and I was like, I don't know, am I supposed to be teaching this? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was funny because we brought that up in our teacher conference. We're like, yeah, like that you should go by her comments from the teacher in the grade, not this. And I'm like, maybe you should have put a sticky note on it because like we don't know and like they just expect that we can figure this out and Heather, I think you said this was a new type of testing, but grade one's a little early, whereas like the grade three is the sweet spot, I think is what you're telling me. You can elaborate, but I just felt like maybe we should communicate more, which is like my life at this point. Is like maybe if people just, talked a bit more, explained what this type of testing is, slap a sticky note, do not worry, like something, because getting that as a parent, like I was horrified and like had my first call.
Yeah, I mean, no, grade one is great. The earlier you can catch them, the better. Um, and so, I mean, it's that they are more likely to get identified as they get into grade 4 and 5, just because the challenge when it comes to the expectations takes a pretty big leap then. So the kids who have been able to fly under the radar and use their intelligence to hide their struggles will often hit the wall at that point. They can't do it anymore. Um,
But then you're picking up a crumbling kid as to what we were talking about before,
oh,
right?
yeah. That's why earlier, grade one, I mean, the screenings and things that they should be doing absolutely in those earliest grades, because the sooner you catch them, I mean, on so many different levels, the better it is.
I mean, what I'm hearing is I'm an ace parent is really what I'm hearing. But
Basically, that's the takeaway from this.
really though, if I
I
didn't
tell
have
you that all the time.
if I didn't have Heather's influence though, like I wouldn't know from my own personal experience, but I would have been lost. And you had mentioned a couple of minutes ago about like things people can do. Is there something like we can give our audience for like touch points of like what they can look for or where they can kind of direct their attention to just even identify what's happening?
Hmm. And just before moving to that, I did want to mention too, like if you had gotten that sticky note that said, don't worry about it, that would have been a negative thing, right? Because you did need to worry about it because there
Yeah,
was something to be investigated.
that's true.
And just, another of the, you were telling me about, the grades and the comments on the report card and how everything looked so fine. And I think I told you this, but I'll share it again. But one of our students, for example, he was in grade 7 and he was a solid like B minus C plus student all the way along. And the parents were having some suspicions. I can't exactly recall the thing that made them finally go and investigate. I think they watched a video that was talking about warning signs and and so they reached out and we did some assessments. And the first thing that we do on the most basic level, we have them print out the alphabet. And we've had students in grade 4 and 5 who were doing fine, not even pass that first little basic thing. But this student, grade 7, B minus, C plus student, he couldn't spell the months of the year and the days of the week. I mean, and yet he had made it that far. We always review the report card comments from the previous years as well to see, looking for evidence. There had been no concerns raised in anything for this student, and he had just somehow been passed along. And his case was severe enough that skills that a student at that age should have, he didn't have. So it does require digging in, and you can't just count on what the report card says.
So it sounds to me like grade 1 and 2 are really important because
While we're waiting, I can because you had asked about what things parents should be watching for.
Mhm.
So even at a very, very young age, before they're even in school, some of the things, because it's a language-based learning disability, things like the child having difficulty with rhyming, right? Well, kids can do rhyming games usually at a very young age. If they're struggling with that,
Yeah.
struggling with learning, those letters of the alphabets and the sounds that they make, as they get older, you'll see one of the things that can be a struggle too has to do with directionality.
Mm.
And so,
Like, is that with like sevens backwards and things like that?
yeah. And it's not because they see things backwards. That's something people often will misunderstand, but it's just learning the strokes you make with your pencil to do, like the number 5, right? They would start it at the wrong point and go in the wrong direction, and then that would result in the letter being printed in the wrong direction.
When you were teaching me about B's and C's, the way that you draw them, and not the way that I do it, but it's like she seems to know what she's talking about. But it was like, because I go like, what did you say? It was like a C. If it was a D, it would be like you start with a C first and go up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that. I literally go down and like around. But I'm
Yeah.
so dyslexic.
And it's also something it can be that they will form their letters, and they might even be forming the letter differently each time they print it.
Yeah.
And any of these things don't mean, oh, this happens, therefore my child has a learning disability. That's not the case. But these are little flags to keep an eye for. And as there are more of them, the more you need to consider looking into it.
And
And the struggle with what's that?
On that point of like the backwards whatever, like the letters and the numbers, just as a extra point, right? That seemed to be what the teachers were relying on when they had the conference with us. Oh, we don't see her doing this. And it was like,
The letter reversals.
that's not the only thing we're looking for. Like it was
Yeah.
like, but that was like the knowledge base, right? Like it was like, I don't know what their expertise are in this stuff, but it was an odd thing that it was just like they were shocked and they like didn't like it was just.
And to that, actually, even if she was doing letter reversals in grade 1, that's actually still normal
Yeah.
for kids who are just learning regardless. So for her, letter reversals wouldn't have been as big a flag. I mean, again, alongside with other things, but if that was the only thing, then it's, well, you can consider that to be still a normal thing for a child who's in grade 1.
Yeah.
But then, of course, as they're learning to read, they'll read a word. You'll teach, what's this word, Mom? You tell her what it is. Okay. 1 page later, she comes across the word. What's this word? It's that, not, or she'll try to sound it out. And then on the next page, she'll sound it out differently.
Yeah.
And guessing, you'll see that so much. There's a word like, I don't know, museum, and they will look at the picture and say City Hall, or, guessing based on even the shape and the first letter of the word.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of that.
I've seen all of that.
Yeah, all of those things. So these are just a handful of some of the things to watch for, that could indicate and that there's something there that needs to be investigated. It's a massive amount of things, but these are some of the earlier stage things. And again, with the directionality too, that can be things like learning to tie their shoes, because that's a ordered sequence steps they have to do in a certain order with correct directions. And again, that can point to other things as well. Children on the spectrum have difficulty learning to tie their shoes, fine motor issues. There's lots of reasons. But there's just so many different things that could raise those flags that it's a shame, we don't have the knowledge of that as widespread as it should be, for sure.
I feel like I'll be now screaming it from the top of my roof. Also, I mean, not related whatsoever, but when our house had mold in it and we were like infested with mold, like that too, right? It's like one of those things, it's like everybody should know this crap. Why not?
Yeah.
And so even going through with Eva with the dyslexia, which has brought up other things for me, which we will talk on in the second part of this episode next time. I feel like I'm hoping we've got her on the right path now, because honestly, like I can see the joy when she's done talking with your tutor, and it's like a refreshed Eva, right? And like that's what I'm hoping for. Like she's and she's so smart, and it's just like how does she execute
She
it,
is so smart.
right? And I told her, I think I told you at one point, like I was she was low of the low before we started with you. I'm never gonna learn to read. I'm stupid and crying, and I just felt so upset with her. And I said, listen, I said, you know that mommy has a very successful business. Yes, I do. Okay. You know that when you were, when I was your age, I also struggled with the same stuff. And I learned different ways to problem solve. And now you see what I'm doing. Yes, I understand. So I said, we have a superpower. And she's like, we have a superpower. And I said, we have a superpower because we know how to problem solve differently, and we know how to get to different answers, like the same answer in different ways. And I think that was a little bit of help, just as like you are not alone. I mean, this is my brand at this point. No one's alone. We're all doing stuff, right? And it's just about talking to other people, because if there's anything I can lend to her, it's like I have been in that experience. I've lived through that experience and it was not great. And so all the stuff that I have learned that I'm trying to align again in my life, I am determined that she will not deal with that in that type of level of experience.
Mhm.
So it's just, yeah.
It's good though, because like you said, you can be a living success story for her, right? And she can see, like, she admires you. She knows what you've accomplished, and that your capability levels are super high. And so she can see that and be like, oh, well, mom has the same difficulty as I do, and look at her. So it's really positive that you're able to do that for her
Yeah.
and demonstrate that for her. But yeah, it's, for families that there's other siblings, that can be a struggle for them too, because there's a child who has some sort of difference, whether it's specifically dyslexia or whatever it is,
Mhm.
they are going to automatically need more of the parents' time and energy and emotional resources and money. And so, just in terms of that mental health aspect, that the toll is family wide, the child themselves, and then the parents, and then, of course, the other siblings. And there are absolutely strategies and things that you can do if you're a parent and you have other children who are neurotypical and are feeling that when you're having to spend a lot more time and energy, educating them, being very sure to give them one-on-one time, that you're a safe place for them to come and talk if they're feeling frustrated, if they're, I feel like you're spending so much time with, Sally, and I'm feeling left out, that they're safe to come and talk to you about that. So there's strategies for that too, but the mental health piece absolutely is huge.
I think on a sibling basis, I think that, I mean, in this circumstance, Eva's an only child, so I count
Mhm.
myself lucky in that situation because what I experienced is my sister's 4 years younger than me, and she can spell, she can read, she has grammar, all of the stuff, like all of it. And so I do think when I reflect back, other than all of the stuff that we won't get into today. I do think that my parents were looking at a 4 year younger sibling. I mean, like, she can do it. Why can't you
Mhm.
as the oldest child? And that like compounds all the stuff. And that's just
Yeah.
that's your personal brand to your parents at that point. It's like, I'm not trying, I'm not doing all this stuff because it doesn't come to me easily. And so that's why, I mean, I was a child in the 80s, so it's like it was different in the 80s, but that's why, like, those are some of the memories of like flashcards, like trying to teach me how to
Mm.
spell and like skipping book assignments and stuff because I just couldn't. And not to mention the horror I felt before someone would call me in class to read something. Oh my God. Like,
Yeah, or to come up and write on the board for something.
oh, thank you. Like, oh my God. And that's the thing. It's like you just like you stand out like a sore thumb because they're expecting you can produce and you just can't, and nobody has identified it in a way that stops them from calling you to the board or stops them or redirects the interest of that. And so my hope is that Eva doesn't have to deal with that kind of crap
Hmm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah. There's so much shame
So
associated
much
with that,
shame.
right?
Yeah.
And with you having a younger sister who didn't have those struggles, your parents, you were the first child, and so they were going through these things with you and thinking maybe that was normal or it didn't stand out. But then when you have a younger sibling come along, quite a few years later, and then when they're attempting those same things and it comes to them so quickly and easily,
Mhm.
um,
Well, think about the gap too, right? Like if I,
yeah,
so Eva's 7, and so if I was having those types of difficulties in that same arena, we would have to wait for my sister to get to that arena, and I would be past that then, like 4 years, right? And so it's like they wouldn't have known until she got there that she could do it and I couldn't, or we do it differently. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it's been a,
And that happens too, where one of the things we say is, why now? Why are you reaching out to us at this point? Like, what was the thing? And it will happen that they're like, well, we have a younger child, and now that our younger child is at this point where they're learning these things, we're noticing, oh, what we were going through with the older child was a very different story than what we're going through now with our younger child. So now we're realizing this older child, maybe we need to be looking at stuff because now they have a basis of comparison with that second child.
us poor older children, I'm telling you. Like, we can get the bad end of the stick, right? Because we would
Yeah.
struggled so long until then, and they're like, "Oh, this might be a thing," and you're like, "Thanks for coming on board here." Oh my God, that's a next time show. Heather, tell us where people can find you, and we'll direct them there for all of their similar needs like this, because what you do is amazing, and we would be in a very different boat if you weren't my bestie. So.
Yeah, well, they can go to our website, theopendoor.ca, and that's where we have all of our information. That's where they can get in touch, request a phone call, because sometimes, you just want to get on the phone with someone and talk it through. But yeah, the website is the best first point, and then from there we can figure out what we're looking at and what would be the best fit for their needs.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom amongst us. I do appreciate you coming on. And for everyone that's watching, please like, subscribe, and get notified on YouTube or find us on any of your podcast subscriber. And until next time, we will see you then on The Inner Shift.
Thanks for having me on. Bye bye.